Hello, my name is Eileen Strombel. I'm the Senior Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm also a very proud board member for NISTS. I'm very happy to see you all here and see such a great crowd for the close of the 16th Annual National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students Annual Conference. This is the only conference of its kind in the country where researchers, practitioners, those who care and love transfer students all come together to try to share research, best practices, all to improve student transfer success. All of this is really only possible because of Janet Marling. She has been with the Institute, with NISTS since the very founding in 2002. And she had came here to UNG, was that 2012. And she is the executive director of NISTS. And I really want all of us to take all that we have soaked up from this conference, soaked up each other, all the new inspiring stories and practices, and think of how we can go back to our own campuses, how we can use that to influence the conversations and to make things better for the students that we touch on our campuses, and how we can be our own best transfer ambassadors. So it is my deep pleasure as a friend, as a colleague, to introduce to you Janet. And I hope that as you listen to her, I already want you to start brainstorming about how you can be your own best transfer champion when you return home. It has been an honor and a delight to share this conference with you and put the 17th Annual Conference right on your books for next year. Thank you, and without any further ado, Dr. Janet Marling.
So kind. I'm not sure that I can get up the steps. My head's so big, it's making me lopsided. All right, well, I'm going to ask the transfer student ambassadors to make their way up front, and I'm going to reciprocate and give a little love to Eileen. We had the opportunity at the opening to recognize Dr. Stephen Handel as one of the 2 editors of the Volume 2 that you received whenever you came to join us a few days ago. And Eileen is the editor, the co-editor of that publication as well. So Eileen, thank you for your hard work, your efforts, and one more time. And yes, and Judith shepherded that process too, and Steve was very clear in sharing that news as well. So thank you to the both of you. Well, I thought it was only fitting that if we were going to talk about the state of transfer, that we actually hear from those who are the recipients of what it is that the federal government, that the state governments, and all of us across our campuses are doing in the name of transfer. And we won't have the full time on the panel, but I just couldn't let you all get away without putting your faces up here, without letting them hear literally your voices. And so we're going to ask all of you a few questions. If you can do me the first favor, and we'll start with you, Veronica, if you will just introduce yourself, let us know what institutions you have attended and where you have landed, what your major is, and how soon you'll be flying the coop.
Can they hear me? Hello, my name is Veronica Sanders. I started out at the Art Institute of Dallas in 2008. And I was there for 2 quarters, but then I had my son, and tuition was $15,000 a year. So I said, I think I'm gonna skip out and try something different. So I transferred to El Centro in 2013. This was after being a stay-at-home mom for a few years, and then just kind of working to bring extra income into the home. From there, I went to the University of Texas at Arlington, which is where I'm currently attending. I graduate this May. Yay! I am pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Interior Design. And was that the...
That's great.
That's it? Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for making it all the way to the very end. My name is Diana, and I am currently a political science major at UC Berkeley. After graduating high school, I attended one of my local community college, Irvine Valley College in SoCal, and then I also went to the sister school in that community college district, Saddleback Community College. I was there 2 years, transferred to Berkeley, where I got spring admission for spring 2016 instead of that normal fall admission. So that's also something to take into consideration with transfer students. There's different semesters, different quarters to take into consideration.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Veloz. I'm currently a senior at the University of Texas at Austin, majoring in government. I actually started off at a private four-year institution. Unfortunately, ran into some personal problems, financial problems with my family, withdrew, and then I ended up at a community college. So I ended up at El Centro Community College, where I was really able to flourish and grow, and then transfer out to UT Austin 2 years later.
Great, thank you. And our fourth student, who unfortunately isn't with us at this point in time, Brandon, got on a plane today, and he is also graduating in May, like our other panelist here. He's doing his graduate school interviews literally as we speak down in South Florida. So he was with us until about 4:30 this morning, and he has gone. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about his story. He also started at another institution, and when he got to Stockton, he decided he was going to be an orthodontist. And then he started working for some fabulous folks in the Office of New Student and Parent Programs, and really was empowered to do a lot of programming, and now actually runs the programs. We heard yesterday that we ought to empower students. From Diana said, we need to let the students run their own programs, plan their own programs, and guess what? Brandon gets to do that at Stockton. So I'm sure that experience that he's had with Jen and also with Tom Greats will parlay him into a really good opportunity, and hope, send good vibes his way. So for those of you still sitting here, I am curious to know, what were the biggest hurdles in your transfer journey?
The biggest hurdle in my transfer journey was trying to make sure that I selected a school that was accredited, because I intend on being a licensed interior designer. So one thing that had happened, which is a reason why I transferred from El Centro to the University of Texas at Arlington, was that licensing laws changed in the state of Texas, and so all of the junior colleges are no longer accredited under this licensing law. And so I needed to attend a minimum of a bachelor's degree program that was accredited, and so that was my main reason for why I transferred to UT Arlington. However, having had lost all of my credits when I transferred from the Art Institute to El Centro, that was my main concern, was just making sure that the 2 years that I spent at El Centro, that some of those classes would at least transfer. Most of them did not. So that was my biggest hurdle, was just trying to make sure that those credits would be articulated at the following college, and then also having children, I wanted to make sure that I had the time to attend classes and keep the high GPA that I've been working so hard to continue to have.
Great.
For myself, I think the biggest hurdle was pushing through and really trying to break the stigma of you'll get stuck at community college. I know personally my high school really pushed the idea of four-year institutions to underrepresented populations. So it really didn't connect, thinking, okay, let's just push all these students to 4 years, regardless if it doesn't fit their style or what they're interested in, or they're just 17, 18-year-olds who don't really know what they want to do. And I come from an area where it's predominantly Latino and first-generation American college students, so it's already tough enough to navigate that. So even my parents didn't really understand the concept of, oh, okay, you can go into community college and actually transfer out. Because I have an older brother who is still at community college, and he took a few years off, but I think seeing that, I was like, no, I need to go. He enrolled back in community college, and he's like, okay, now I'm going to transfer, and he just applied to transfer this fall, so good luck to him. But I think that's one of the biggest things, is just pushing through when everybody around you is like, okay, well, you're just gonna end up being there way longer than you need to be, taking unnecessary classes. It's just constantly pushing past that and saying, like, okay, what do I need to do to get to my end goal?
Thank you.
I think that the biggest hurdle for me was definitely finances. During my first semester at a private university, my father got very, very sick, so we ended up with $250,000 in debt in the healthcare system. So I withdrew from that university, started waiting tables at my local Olive Garden. The breadsticks are great. Yeah, they are great. And so I started waiting tables to help support my family. So by the age of 18, I was paying for most of the rent and most of the bills and being self-sufficient for my family. And then, of course, I decided to enroll back in a community college because really it afforded me the opportunity to continue working full-time and going to school full-time, which I do not recommend. I do not recommend at all. I did that for 2 years and I burned out by the end of those 2 years. And my biggest worry actually when transferring out was, even if I get accepted into a four-year university, am I going to be able to afford it? And if I can't afford it, am I going to be able to do so while working a full-time job? And it was my biggest worry that I would go to a place like UT or Columbia and have to work 40 hours a week to still keep supporting my family, myself, and my education. Thankfully, I was able to get the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation scholarship, which has basically made it so that I never have to work while going to school ever again. And it also made it so that my family is able to support themselves and I have to take care of myself too. Now, they still can't financially support me, but because I have this scholarship, I'm able to go to school, focus on my grades. I remember my first semester at UT Austin, I would just say, this is the happiest I've ever been in a very long time. And it was because I finally had the time to sleep, to be with friends, to actually become a student, and all of it that it entails. And you don't understand how much financial aid can really help a person become really what they were always meant to be and really reach their full potential as a student.
Thank you. Now we know high touch is really important, and having the opportunity to have mentors and champions and sponsors throughout your time. Was there a particular individual at either your community college or perhaps your current institution that has really helped shepherd you through your academic process?
My academic advisor, her name is Cheryl Donaldson. She is basically like the mother, I would call her, of our campus for the School of Architecture. I think she's actually currently pursuing her own Ph.D. in landscape design, landscape architecture, and so she kind of already knows what it's like to be in school and then also working full time and also having a family. So I felt like she really resonated with me and kind of understood where I was coming from as a student and a parent and a second career woman, and just knowing that she was there for me. She was always available to answer any kind of questions. I could call her on her office phone and she would pick up. I could send her a personal email and she would reply. I actually feel like she's like a second mother, almost like a best friend at this point. I really would hate to leave and knowing that I won't be able to see her anymore. So I definitely consider my advisor to be the one person that allowed me to be successful. She's even allowed me to be a TA for her class, because when I transferred some of the classes, it's like I came in as a junior, but as a freshman, if that makes sense, because of the credits that I had. And so some of the classes I wasn't able to take because I had already taken them at a different campus. And because of that, I lost one of my scholarships. And so she allowed me to just kind of come in as a TA to kind of help with some of my credits so I don't lose any more of my scholarships. So just her, kind of lending that helping hand was definitely a huge help, and I appreciate her for that, for sure.
So a shout out to all the advisors in the room. Thank you for what you do.
Unfortunately, during my time at community college, I was just so focused on transferring, I didn't really care about going to one specific counselor. It was just whoever I can see at this point, I need to get in, get out, I have to go to work after, I don't have time to really make friendships or build relationships. But I will say that after transferring now at Berkeley, that's completely different. My first semester in, I really came in looking to find a home, somewhere where I can start building my community, where I can get my support, and I applied to the Transfer Student Center, which thankfully I've noticed that not many institutions have, but if it's possible, I would push everyone to try to make that happen. So yes, I'm very fortunate that my executive director at the Transfer Center, Lorena, started that about, 20 years ago now, because it's definitely helped students at Berkeley find community. I've been there now for 2 years, and I'm going to be there until I graduate. So if I I feel if a student is willing to stay at the same place for over a year, over a semester, and go beyond just saying like, okay, well, it's a job, I think that's a home. And I've been able to meet some of my best friends there now at Berkeley that I know I will continue to have their friendship after we graduate. And the best part is knowing that I can always reach out to both Lorena and my academic counselor, Steve. I can text them, say like, hey, and I know that will also happen after I graduate, and say like, hey, like I need help with this. For instance, they're the ones who told me you should look into applying for this. We went last year. We really think you should apply, and here I am. So if it weren't for their push and constant support, I think the transition experience could have been a little bit different. But fortunately, it's been a positive one. And that's why whenever I meet other transfer students, I'm like, you need to get yourself out there, find your resources, use them. Don't be afraid to ask or say that you need help, because people will be willing to help you. And you just need to express like, okay, I need help. This is what I want to do. People will open up doors for you.
That's been a theme that Diana has really spent a lot of time on. Whenever we saw her video, as well as I had the opportunity to visit with the person who interviewed her for her campus paper, they said, oh my goodness, she's encouraging me to go out there and use my resources. She's just it's a big ambassador. So you've learned well, and you're sharing that with the masses, and I think that's really impressive.
I think for me, it was, so her name is Dr. Perez. She's an English professor. And she actually started off the first day of class by telling us how she dropped out of college 3 times before she was able to actually get her bachelor's degree. So she told us this very long story, and then she started talking about John Wayne. She's a really good professor. But she told us the story because she said, it's typically a freshman class. As a transfer, I had to take it with all these freshmen. That was very fun. But she told us a story because she said, you know, if this is your first semester here at UT, it's going to be really rough. There are a lot of times when you want to give up and not continue forward. She said, if you get into those times, come to me and talk to me. And I had a lot of those times my first semester. I think my first semester, I cried a lot because it was so hard, and I just didn't know if I would fit in. But I would go to her a lot, and I would just talk and say, it's really hard. I don't know what's happening, what's going on, and she would just point me the way and say, you know, I think you're a really smart student, you know, here are some resources, go and do this, go and do that, as an English professor. And then she was also the one when I needed a recommendation to do the Archer program, which allowed me to end up interning at the White House. She was the only professor that responded to my email when I asked for a recommendation. At that point, she knew some about me. She knew enough that I would go to her office hours and talk to her. But when I sat down and I pleaded with her, I was like, listen, I got an A in your class. I know you know me. Here are my credentials. Could you help me out? And she said, of course. There is no reason why I wouldn't want to help you out. And since then, I think she's been with me ever since my first semester. Now I know her son. We'll go out, she'll invite me to dinner to her house, and we'll just talk about, she loves comic books, so we'll talk about comic books. But really, it was because I don't think she understands how important it was for me to hear the words, you're going to be okay. Especially as a transfer student for your first semester. Sometimes we forget, you know, that really for a lot of transfer students, they know what they're capable of. They're smart, they're intelligent, they're talented, but they need somebody to go up to them and say, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's gonna be fine. You are more than capable of doing anything and everything that you want to do, and I know you're tired, but I really deeply believe in you. And for a lot of transfer students, those words can make a lifetime of difference.
Absolutely.
I'll be remiss if I didn't, my husband isn't here, but I feel like I also have to kind of give a little shout out to him because as an architecture interior design student, my hours are 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. the next morning. That's how my schedule goes. And so for these late nights where I can't, talk to him because he's passed out and I'm still working on homework. I really feel like he's also like one of my hugest supporters because, you know, when I can't be there, you know, for the basketball games, he's there. When I can't be there for the doctor appointments because I have to go to class, like he's there. So I think that a lot of transfer students have, you know, their family backing them up, you know, behind the scenes, and, you know, they're just as much of a student as we are on some level because they're kind of dealing with our homework as well. So definitely my husband as well, for sure.
Excellent. That's so good. And it takes a tremendous amount of support to make that leap and to be successful, both academically as well as just personally and within your family. And I think it's important for all of us in the audience to understand the power of words, the power of encouragement, the power of our positions, because what we say matters to our transfer students, how we say what matters to our students, and the influence that we have oftentimes isn't recognized within ourselves. But clearly, we have an opportunity to truly support and impact these students. Well, you have the opportunity to tell these folks anything that you think they need to know. You've given them a few nuggets thus far, but what is that thing that you want them to know that they're going to take back to their own campuses or their organizations about being a transfer student and helping transfer students be successful? What's that piece of advice?
I think the main piece of advice is that we all are not 19 years old. I think most, you know, just even being in my own classroom, like my professors, they don't really know who I am until I have to basically say, I'm sorry I can't be at this off-campus thing because my child has something going on, and, you know, and I just won't be able to make this. And then they're like, oh, you're a mother? How many kids do you have? Like, and I've been in the classroom for a month at least at this point. And so just knowing that we all aren't 19, we all aren't just fresh out of high school, we all aren't just, you know, single people with no life outside of school. And I think that the curriculum is kind of set up for those type of people and not necessarily for those who have full-time jobs and lives. Especially in the School of Architectures, I can't tell you how many nights, you know, they're expected for us to be up until, like, you know, I say, well, I didn't go to sleep until 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're just like, oh, well, you should just not go to sleep until 4 o'clock in the morning because that's how School of Architecture works. However, you don't realize how much I have going on behind the scenes. And so I think if we are realizing that, you know, a transfer student is also a non-traditional student, they're also a parent, they're a second career, there are full-time jobs that they're taking or that they have, and they have families, they have notes, like just bills, like, you know, outside of school. So just having that support system for those things that you don't typically see from your regular student, I think is very important to make sure that that is taken care of.
Thank you.
One of my biggest pieces of advice would be don't set limitations on your students. I think a lot of people think that they're in a role where they're meant to encourage students and do better, which you are, but sometimes saying things like, okay, well, you're here now, let's see what we can get you started on because you need to get to it, you have 2 years, things like that do kind of set in, and it's like, okay, well, I'm happy I transferred, but now it's like, okay, now I'm on a new timeline where I need to go because I'm already behind. For instance, like studying abroad, a lot of transfers think that they can't study abroad because of classes or they don't have the time or the money, but in reality, sometimes studying abroad could be even cheaper than attending your current institution, or there's different scholarships that are available to study abroad. And fortunately, I've been able to study abroad, so it is possible, regardless of your major, you can make it happen. And it really is just like I was prefaced earlier, it's empowering your students, letting them do some of the work too, because no one is going to try to have the best intentions as another student. So it's really the mentality of let transfer students help other transfer students, because they want to have that personal touch and say like, okay, I know that another student went through this, I'm not the only one, I'm not the only one that wants to accomplish this while I'm at my current institution. So it really is letting students know that you have their back, that you're going to do what you can to help them, build and empower themselves. And it's not necessarily saying, okay, well, let me build a curriculum for you, or let me establish this program, but it's saying, okay, you know what, like, you get started on it, you mobilize your other fellow transfer students to get this going, and I'll provide you the guidance and support, because at the end of the day, you are the professionals, and we look up to you, and you have so many skills that we don't have yet, so that is important, and we need you to know that you're accessible to us, and that you're listening to us, because it's a two-way street, so we need to really help each other. And you're all really busy and have a lot on your plate, so let us take some of that work off of your plate, and we can keep it going.
Thank you.
No, I echo all of that completely. I think that's really what happened at UT, is you saw a lot of transfer students really being their own self-advocates, and I think that's how you really saw a lot of change. But what I would like to say is I'm not going to bore you with like more technical, data-driven student results, because I'm sure you've heard that all week. But what I do want to say is this. I think this is a very difficult profession. You don't do this for the money, you really do this for the students. And you are very much student-driven. With that being said, I think a lot of the times we do focus on like these big, huge, innovative programs which are of the utmost necessity to be able to see big change within our campuses. But don't be afraid to just really like build those connections with your students and be able to really help those students out on a personal basis and say, you know, this doesn't seem like it's a big change, but helping you study abroad is a big change to a student. Helping you get into a class that you wouldn't have been able to get into before is a big change for a student. I think, you know, there's a big focus on macro level change, which there should be, because that's where we see these big results. But don't forget that for a lot of students, such as myself, such as Diana, and such as Veronica, that really we just want to be able to do things that other students are provided the opportunity to do. We want to be able to do and be treated like any other students with the same amount of resources, with the same amount of respect and due diligence, and be able to see that we have the unlimited potential that everybody else sees in the traditional student. Because we do have that unlimited potential. And all of that happens with these face-to-face conversations and letting them know that there are these other opportunities that you are able to do. So see that unlimited potential in those students, work with that unlimited potential for those students, because at the end of the day, I think that's really where we'll be able to see the biggest and best results with this partnership.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Please thank our panelists. Don't they give you goosebumps? I mean, it's good stuff. And we cannot be reminded enough of their voice, of the importance that they hold in the lives that we lead and the work that we do. And I thank the three of you for your courage to get up here and tell us your stories and tell us how it is, and make sure that we stay in line and remember to always keep you at the center of our work. So thank you very much. Well, Louis just gave me a nice segue to be talking about those macro level things, because we do need to explore a little bit about potentially what's coming down the pike. And if you just do a really quick environmental scan, I mean super quick environmental scan about transfer, there's kind of some things that come up and they might not be so great. Okay, so the first one is that transfer is complex, right? We kind of know that. The stats, and you've been hearing them all conference, are kind of bleak. Yeah, a little bit. And the system sometimes feels a little bit broken. But am I discouraged? I'm not. I'm not, because we're all in it and we're all trying to figure out how to make this happen. So let's put that aside. Let's look at some of the things coming down the pike, and then let's look at what that means for you in the work that you're doing. So some of the trends, fortunately, you're going to hear a few things that have been reiterated while we were having various plenary sessions as well as our time together in our concurrent sessions. But one of the things that I think is probably the biggest thing holding us back as a profession is the data. and the fact that the data are truly incomplete. And you heard John Fink mention that earlier, saying that we just don't have a good handle on where people, we're doing so much better at understanding mobility, but we cannot really unpack who those individual students are. Right now, we continue to have a congressional ban on that student level data. We really can't get at who these people are, where they're moving, how they're doing, and how the institutions are really serving these individuals. So it makes it a little bit difficult for us to track transfer, track student transfer success. At the institutional level, we find that sometimes it's difficult to get the data that we're looking for because our IR departments either are very tiny, like we heard the other day, or maybe you just have a data guru, you don't even have an entire IR department, or perhaps the list of things that they have to do is so incredibly long and involved because we're such a compliance-oriented field at this point in time that the things that we just want to know for our own edification and that student improvement don't ever make it up in the queue. So there are lots of things that are holding us back from a data perspective that's really frustrating. I had an example just this week as we're sitting in the opening session. I get a message from a friend of mine who is part of an organization with which I'm affiliated, and he asked an incredibly simple question. He asked me, what is the success rate of students transferring from a four-year institution to a four-year institution? Embarrassingly, I was stumped. I said, okay, let me think about it. Immediately, I could tell you all kinds of things about that 2-year to 4-year transfer student and how well they fare, again, in the aggregate. But I couldn't get there in my mind. So luckily, I ran around to the rooms because we have lots of really prominent researchers here. And I said, so what do you know about this 4-year to 4-year transfer? And we said, gosh, I feel like there's something out there, but I can't find it. Okay, couldn't find it. So I get on my email and I email some of my really good friends in these various places that live in data all the time. And they said, that's a great question. We don't know. So, I mean, to me, that sounds like such a simple question, but obviously we're still new in our data and getting a sense of what that data look like. And so it's really important that as you have questions, write them down, start those questions, communicate with folks whenever you find those answers, because there are other people across your campuses and your organization asking those same questions. You need to make sure that you're getting those answers widely distributed. The completion agenda is still very prominent on the minds, and it's a good thing. We want more Americans to be credentialed. And I assert that the completion agenda will never be achieved without a focus on transfer. Thank you. Unfortunately, the focus kind of comes at a little bit of an angle here and there. We talk about those adult learners, approximately 1 out of 5 who have, over the age of 25, who have some credits but no degree. That's a great population to be thinking about. But you know what? Policymakers say, oh, those folks are close. Let's just pop them back into the higher education system. Is that how it works? Do we have the classes to support these learners when they need to be taught? Do we have sufficient online learning opportunities? Do we have sufficient child care facilities for these folks that we're asking to come back into the fold? I don't know that we've really thought about that. But gosh, yes, it's a great population. Lots of people call it the low-hanging fruit. We'll go get those folks that just have 16 more hours to get. And sometimes it's easier, but most of our institutions haven't become equipped to deal with that population. So there are lots of things that the completion agenda is a good thing, but we've got some work to do to really focus it from a transfer perspective for sure. Another thing that's concerning is financial aid. I know all of you deal with it on your campuses. At the federal level, we're really looking at the need-based aid. We're looking at that at the state levels, particularly here in Georgia. That's something that we're very, very concerned about. You hear all kinds of stories, people playing with, well, are we going to get the same amount of money for our Pell? How is that going to be distributed? What's that going to look like? Just recently, as last week, we had folks testifying, not we, but there were folks in the higher education arena testifying on Capitol Hill saying these are the things that our students are facing. This is how we are disadvantaging our low-income students whenever we try to change policies in order to streamline the way in which we administer federal financial aid. On our campuses, I am pleased to report that we have more student scholarships for our transfer students, and that's good. That's good money. That's tiny money. If you think about the fact that a student can be a direct entry student and get packaged aid at the rate of $25,000 for their first semester on campus, the first year, when they come back as a first semester sophomore, they're offered $2,500. And that's a true story. So there are some things we need to be thinking about. Also, what do our deadlines look like whenever it comes to financial aid? Have we already distributed things? And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done around that financial aid piece. Then we think about what's going on at the state levels. I think you saw we had an opportunity to hear from Michelle, and there's lots going on with regard to state policy. I'm really excited to know that folks are thinking about evaluating state policies. We have some long-standing policies that have never really truly been evaluated. There's a difference between assessing and really evaluating something, and I don't think we're there yet. So yes, thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. And so there really has to be a sense of how is this working? Is it working as intended? And as you find, we did a big study in the state of Texas almost 10 years ago now. Talking to my colleagues from Texas, we're still dealing with the exact same unintended consequences for our transfer students. So again, policy is a good thing. Policy without being evaluated on a regular basis is not a good thing. There's some work that we need to be doing there. So again, I don't want you to think that I'm thinking that everything's bad, because it's not, but I've been struggling, and I won't lie. This last year, we've been thinking about the Institute becoming fully staffed and doing some strategic planning. I've really been grappling with, what's our role? What's our impact? And had an opportunity to be on a phone call with a couple of my board colleagues last fall. We were spending time planning a college board forum session that we were going to have, talking about those promising practices and partnerships and all those things that we know work, and we were ready to take on the world that I don't know. I think I just had it that day. I have no idea. But I was fired up, and I just said, when? At what point is transfer truly going to matter? It just blows my mind that we're talking about this again. There's a little bit of radio silence on the other side because I think they were giving me my space. But it was something that had been troubling me, and I think it was honestly a manifestation of a lot of things. I think that in the last year, many of us, definitely me, I'm going to claim that, have been feeling a little helpless about the ways that I could influence change, both in my professional life and I think in the world at large. And so I think that I've just been spending some time, feeling like where's my sphere of influence? How can I change things? And then again, just the opportunities to really look at how NISTS could be different. So that stuck with me. We got off the call. Nobody was, too terribly hurt by this, but it stayed with me whenever we finished, and they let me incorporate that into the session. But what I really came away with was transfer students won't matter until the right people begin to think they matter. The right people. And that's hard to say. I won't lie, because I feel like I'm the right person. I feel like you all are the right person, but somehow it's not really coming together. The Institute was founded over 16 years ago to really come together. We knew there was a real dearth of information in the literature about transfer students. We knew that there were spatterings at annual conferences that talked about transfer, but there was no place to really bring this convening together. And that's what we did. And so for a while, we knew that we were really filling an important gap. But I honestly thought that we would do some really good work, learn a lot, and then turn over transfer to the people that really work on student success every day, and that we could then move on to another worthy cause. It's not been our reality. We haven't fixed it, we haven't solved it, and so part of me was just really feeling discouraged. So, what do I do with my discouragement? Again, transfer students will only truly matter when the right people begin to care about them. So until the right people begin to care about our transfer students, I assert that we will continue to have horrifying statistics illustrating the gap between students' collegiate aspirations and their realities. I assert that we will continue to ignore that our community colleges are educating a diverse population vital to the advancement of a healthy economy and a workforce. I assert that we will continue to develop policies and legislative mandates based on an inaccurate perception of who our students are. I assert that proven support programs and services will continue to be under-resourced. And we will fail to recognize that until students, rather than institutions, are the unit of analysis, we will never have transparency around the barriers to access, persistence, and completion. Those things are unacceptable. They truly are. And so these people, these right people, must understand all the things that each and every one of you are doing to help your students succeed. They need to have the evidence that things are working and working well. They need to know about those intentional practices that we've been talking about for the last 2.5 days, the research that's being put forward, the opportunities to learn best practices. They need to know what those are. Because as I was talking with Barbara Lerner yesterday, legislators want to fix the problem. And they're not always sure how to do it, but their bottom line is to look good and fix the problem because either their hearts are really in it or their egos are in it. Either way, they want to fix it, right? So we need to tell them how they should fix it, not from a deficit perspective, but from a promising perspective. Here are the things that we know that are working. So don't misunderstand me. By suggesting that the right people have to know about transfer in order for transfer students to matter, I am not suggesting that the work that we all do and that you all do is unimportant. Just the opposite. When transfer students succeed, and you heard it right here, it's because somebody stepped into their lives, reached out their hand, and said, you can do it. And that's an individual relationship, and that's what we do. So you matter, and the work you do matters on behalf of these students. At the same time, I need you to help me out. So I've got some things that I'm going to ask of you. Like it or not, nothing in life is free. You've been hanging out with us. You ate the bacon. I'm going to put you to work. All right, so I need you to do these 4 things for me. First of all, I need for each and every one of you to reach out beyond your current sphere of influence and strategically determine who all you need to know who are influencers. And I did that just this week. I consulted with my board, and I said, I'm going to give you all a piece of paper, and you're going to write down, I said, who does Janet need to get to know this year? And they wrote me a list, and I'm telling you, it is a long list, and it is going to take me a whole year to get through. But those are folks outside of my sphere of influence that I don't naturally know. But those are the people that can make a difference, that can help leverage what we're doing to make true change. Second, I need you to arm yourself with the balance of student stories, like we've seen here, and the supporting data that paints an accurate picture of your transfer population, the ways in which you are successfully serving them, and what specific, not just pie in the sky, specific improvements that you're going to make if you receive an influx of funds. Too often we say we don't have enough staff. Nobody has enough staff. Oh, we don't have a large enough budget. I get that. But what if you had a funder come to you and say, what would you do if I gave you money? Could you say something quickly? And would it make sense? And would it be evidence-based? Be ready. Somebody might want to give you money. Be ready. Third, seek out unlikely partners and allies who bring a different perspective to transfer and enrich the stories that you're telling. Sometimes we stay in our own lane a little too much. Get creative. Find those people across your campuses, across at other institutions, within your communities that can look at what you're doing through a different lens and maybe make your proposition more attractive to those people who matter. One of the cool things that I learned today, and I thought, or this week, and again, it was one of my aha moments, One of my colleagues here, Sarah Jewett, who is at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, has been doing fantastic work in the area of STEM and curricular alignment for a long time, long as I've known her. Very impressed. She is an educational anthropologist. I assumed that she lived and breathed STEM, but she was lending her lens to these projects to make them more dynamic, to make them more useful, and to make it work within their system. And it just really caused me to think that, wait a minute, what are those different lenses that I could use to maybe enhance my program in the name of making it make sense to somebody else? Because we get really insular. We decide that we know what it is and we're so proud of it and we're passionate about it, but if it doesn't make sense to somebody else, especially the important people that matter, we're not going to get a lot of traction outside of our own circles. So find those unsuspecting allies and partners that you can capitalize on. Fourth, I need you to seize the moment and be creative. I stole that line from Emily, by the way, right there. Use the challenges your institutions are facing, and many of you are, as a way then to get super creative. We've got a school in our area who is facing significant enrollment declines. We see that for our direct entry students. So instead of just waiting for the students to come to them, not only do they go out and do on-site admissions with their community college partners, but they also do on-site registration. Those students are coming to their school. Now again, everybody has their different articulation processes, but you know what? You got them. You're getting creative. You're going out there. Also, use your declining enrollment to look at those different student population types. We heard it 30 times this week. Don't assume that all these students have been somewhere for one semester and are now ready to turn over to your institution. Go out there, be creative, find those other opportunities to bring in students. So it was only 4 things, but I packed a lot of extra stuff into those 4 things. And it's quite possible that you think that I'm asking a lot of you. And I am. I won't lie. This is hard work. There's a lot to be done. But I'm super encouraged that we can do this. So if you were to join me on this journey and accept this challenge that I'm throwing out there, it's possible that during this process, some of you may just say, I'm going to opt out. I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing because there's a 600 caseload that I've got to deal with, or I'm trying to figure out how to orient these students and I'm getting this online module up, or I've got to write this grant. I'm busy. I don't have time to get those influencers into my circle. You could do that because there's, goodness, plenty to keep you busy. There may be some of you who kind of sort of back off because you're not sure if you have a voice in the larger organization. Neither one of those options are going to work. You can do this. Some of you will be talking and leading the charge to those who are already converted, but I need you to stretch and bring those other people into the fold. So if you're not acting in some way to step out of that sphere and figure out how to bring those important people into the conversation, then it makes it really hard for us to make those systemic changes that we all have sat here and claimed that we're interested in making. We can do this. The fortunate students will succeed. Many will not. The data tell us that. But good news, folks. I'm an optimist with a little twist of realism. My husband calls me Miss Positivity. I'd like to think there's enough of my pessimistic father in that I've got a nice balance, though, so I'm not Pollyanna. I just happen to be happy a lot. So this approach, though, allows me to believe that we can do this. We just have to be super intentional about it and figuring out how we can add and make the most change. So I invite you to dream with me a little bit, if you will, and to say, what if? So what if there was a world where transfer students were no longer invisible? What if those structures that provide barriers to our students were eradicated? And what if, just what if? What if? What's your what if? What is your what if? Mine is, what if through your advocacy, you bring the right people to the table and transfers truly matter? That means that these students sitting right here, Luis, Diana, and Veronica, are no longer not the norm. They become the norm. And they can collectively go forward with confidence and be the soon-to-be college graduates that they are and go out there and light the world on fire. I happen to think that'd be pretty cool. What if can become a reality because NISTS supports you, believes in you, and together we can and will absolutely 100% make a difference in the lives of these students, make that systemic change. We can do it together, and we're going to do it one step at a time, and we're going to do it collectively. Good luck. I wish you well. Come see us again next year. Thank you.